What is going on, everybody? I am back today to give you guys another list, and I'm very excited about this list today. And the reason I decided to give you guys this list is because this weekend there's a new film being released called In a Violent Nature, and it is a film about a slasher set from the perspective of the slasher. So instead of being introduced to the kids and following them, we're following the entire movie through the eyes of this killer. And I thought that was a really fascinating concept. And obviously, slasher films have existed for quite some time now, and there are a ton of them, especially like the glut that were released in the 80s and the 90s. And I love slasher movies. I think they're super entertaining and fun, sometimes just really goofy and over the top. And I wanted today to talk about some of my favorite slasher movies. And today, I'm not going to be talking about any of the major franchises. I'm not going to talk about Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Child's Play, Texas Chainsaw, Halloween, Hellraiser, none of the big slasher franchises. I'm not going to talk about those. I've done rank lists of like all of those movies. If you're interested in that, you can pretty much find on my channel every single franchise and hear my thoughts on those. I wanted today to talk about movies that are standalones or movies that aren't associated with a big franchise. There's one exception in this list that technically has some sequels, but I don't consider it in the same vein as the rest of those big franchises. But we'll get to that when we get to that. So I'm going to be talking about some of my favorite slasher movies today that are not associated with larger franchises. So first off, I want to start off by talking about the Slumber Party Massacre from 1982, directed by Amy Holden Jones. This is one of my favorite slasher movies of all time because it is so subversive and unique for the time period. This is a film directed by a woman in a time where slasher films were majority directed by men through the male gaze, where women were very overtly sexualized, really just kind of treated as eye candy for audiences. And what Amy Holden Jones does in this movie is completely flips the script on the audience and creates a slasher movie with female characters that throughout the entire early part of the runtime, when they're at their slumber party, they talk about baseball and just hang out and like enjoy their time with one another. And it really kind of shifts the perspective as what people were seeing from women in these movies. And then the actual slasher villain in this uses a very phallic drill to murder people, and he also like says a lot of like off-color comments like, oh, you deserve this, and like all of these things that can really be associated with women who have been assaulted or taken advantage of by men. And it's an incredibly like thoughtful and really impactful slasher film, while also just being incredibly entertaining and well shot. And I feel like this is a movie that I continue to grow my appreciation of over time. Every single time I revisit this one, it's just so impressive how well shot it is and how well structured it is and entertaining it is, while also being an incredibly thoughtful piece of filmmaking. And not every slasher movie is like that, but I think it's really cool that this one is. And if you've never seen this before, it is a must watch in like slasher film history. Up next is a more modern film, and that is going to be Ty West's X. I absolutely loved this movie. I was a huge fan of X and Pearl. I feel like Pearl is less of a slasher movie, but X really kind of hones in on everything that made a 70s slasher movie great, but does its own unique thing with it. It does a really fantastic job at building tension and suspense. It also builds great characterization. I feel like each and every character in the movie has a very unique personality, which makes it a very easy watch because it's really entertaining to watch all of them. It also says something really interesting about like the sex work industry and pornography in general, and there's a lot of fantastic commentary surrounding it throughout the movie, which I was not expecting the first time I watched it. And I think that the fact that the killers in this movie are elderly people makes it all the more fun to watch, because it's like ridiculous, but all of the kill sequences are taken so seriously, and there are some gnarly, disgusting kill sequences in this movie. I'm also a huge fan of the score to the film. I think it accompanies the movie really well, and I can't wait for Maxine in July this year. I think it's going to be awesome. I cannot believe Ty has made such an incredibly unique set of films, all that kind of encompass different eras in Hollywood and in the horror genre, and it looks like Maxine is going to do the exact same thing. Up next is another more modern horror film, and that is James Wan's Malignant. I absolutely adore this movie. I know this film gets a lot of mixed reactions. I am one of its biggest supporters because James Wan really just kind of went there with this movie, and he said, I'm going to make an over-the-top movie that pays homage to giallo films, that pays homage to slasher movies, to creature features, and it's over the top and campy in the best way possible. And I love that when I saw this movie in the theater, the film starts like a very typical James Wan movie. It's shot, stylized, and structured in the way that most of his movies are, but it completely flips at about the halfway point in the movie. And it's something I respected so much from him as a director, that he was able to just kind of flip the script on the audience and say, I'm going to take this in an entirely different way that you'll never expect. And I love this movie more every time I revisit it. The last time I watched it again, it's so much fun because you know the twist at that point, to just kind of watch all of the little things that he puts in before the twist is revealed that kind of give you an idea as to what direction the movie is going to go in. And if you've never seen this movie before, go in completely blind and watch it. It is so much fun. Up next is what I would probably consider one of the greatest slasher films of all time, and that is Bob Clark's Black Christmas. It's crazy to think that this is directed by the same guy who would later direct A Christmas Story, but this movie is phenomenal. It sets the stage for all slasher movies that would come after it. Even John Carpenter's Halloween, this movie predates Halloween, and you can tell John Carpenter even was inspired by elements from Black Christmas. The very first POV shot of the character sneaking into the sorority house, I really love that about this movie. There's this mystery of who the killer is, and throughout the movie all of these things are put in that kind of send your mind wandering as an audience member, thinking about who this person could be or what they're capable of. There are so many amazing shot sequences in this movie that create anxiety and tension in a way that is so uncomfortable. The film also has really great characterization. All the girls that live in the sorority house have really unique personalities. They're all very well written, and so it makes the movie really easy to watch because it's entertaining. There's comedic bits laden throughout, but there's always that looming threat of anxiety from the very first frame of the film, and it's something that I really appreciate a lot. And it is a movie that I continue to rewatch every year, and I get more out of it every year when I rewatch it. Up next, and this is the film I said would kind of break away from the norm, but I'm going to talk about Sleepaway Camp. I know there have been sequels to Sleepaway Camp, but this movie is not really seen in the same vein as like the Nightmare on Elm Street films or the Friday the 13th films. I love this movie because it is so ridiculous and over the top and fun, and you can just tell the people that worked on this movie had an absolute blast with it. There is a twist in this movie that if you've never seen it before, you will have no idea that it's coming, and it will shock you. It shocked me the first time I watched it, and I will say it continues to shock me throughout the years every time I rewatch it, and that's something that I really appreciate about this film. Felissa Rose, who is one of the lead actresses in the movie, I actually got to go to a screening a while back and see her talk about the process of filming the movie. It was really entertaining to hear some behind the scenes stuff, and it is goofy and it's silly and the plot is really ridiculous, but the slasher moments are taken very seriously, and I really like that most of the kills through this are POV sequences. It makes it all the more impactful as you are watching it, but the silly over the top stories that make you laugh and some of the not great performances that exist in this make it just such a fun and enjoyable ride where I just don't see something like this ever being made again, and that's what I love so much about it. Up next is kind of a two for one. I want to talk about Maniac, but I want to talk about both Maniac films, the original and the remake. I love both of these movies a lot for very different reasons. The original film is so hauntingly terrifying, where you're following this serial killer, seeing him make these horrible kills where he murders people, scalps them, and then puts their scalps on mannequins in his house. And it's a really fascinating movie because we learn little bits of information about the killer in the movie. But we get to a point where he meets this character that's seemingly kind of shifting his perspective, and you wonder throughout the film if he's capable of changing because of the fact that they incorporate all this stuff. But I think you always know in the back of your mind that he's an evil character and that there really is no shot of it. The kill sequences in the original film are horrific. They are so well shot. There are some amazing Tom Savini practical effects in this movie that just make it a really unique watch. The score is incredible as well. And it's just a movie that very much impacted me the first time I watched it. And then the remake, which I believe came out in 2012 with Elijah Wood, is very different because the killer in the original film is this very big, brooding, horrifying individual, where Elijah Wood is much more timid and to himself. And so it creates a very different film, and all the movie is virtually shot through POV. There's a couple of situations where that changes, but it's really impressive what they pull off in this film. It dives a little bit more into the character's relationship with his mother, which unlocks some of the trauma of the character and what probably pushed them to commit these horrific actions associated with their mental illness. And I think diving into that a little bit more creates a very unique experience that's very different than the 1980s film. And both movies exist in their own world, and both movies are worth watching for very different reasons. And if you've never seen either one of them before, they are totally both worth your time. I don't want to go on for forever, but the last one I will mention today is Dario Argento's Tenebrae. I'm a huge fan of giallo films. I'm a huge fan of like the black gloved off-screen killer that we're spending the entire movie not only seeing these kills done, but trying to solve a mystery of who the killer is. This movie is so well shot. It has one of the best scores of any of the Dario Argento films. I really love how this mystery unfolds. You would never really guess what direction this movie was going to go in. And even in revisiting this film, it always takes me by surprise when the killer is revealed, because it's just very shocking the direction that it goes in. The characters are all really great in this movie. I love the cinematography in this film. It's some of my favorite next to Suspiria in Dario Argento's catalog. And it's just a really fun time. And if you've never seen any of Dario Argento's films, Tenebrae is one of the movies I recommend to virtually everyone because it's really easy to get invested in and it's really a fun ride from start to finish. So, what are some of your favorite non franchise slasher films? Let me know in the comments. These are just some of mine. Obviously, I have a lot more, but I wanted to make a video recommending some that you may have not seen before. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.